Einstein's special relativity dismantled one of our deepest intuitions, the idea of a universal present. If you and I are moving relative to each other, we will no longer agree on which events happen at the exact same moment. Philosophers like Reitdijk and Putnam took this mathematical reality and drew a rigid logical conclusion. If your present moment includes events that are in my future, and my present includes events in your past, then no single global slice of time can be uniquely defined as happening now. This logic leads directly to the block universe. Think of a three-dimensional block. If we take a slice representing the now for one observer, and then violently tilt that slice for an observer moving at a different speed, the new slice cuts through the past and future of the first observer. Every event must therefore already exist within a completed four-dimensional object. In this framework, the distinction between a settled past and an open future vanishes. Every moment in time is equally real, mapped out permanently like cities on a map. The feeling of time flowing, of genuine change, is dismissed as a trick of human psychology. We took equations designed to coordinate measurements between different observers and turned them into a metaphysical absolute. By demanding that the math dictate the nature of existence itself, we froze the universe. There is no denying the power of four-dimensional Minkowski spacetime. It elegantly organizes trajectories, causal limits, and intervals into a single geometric language. It is a mathematical architecture that works with extraordinary precision. But a successful mathematical representation of events is not the same thing as the physical reality of those events. Einstein's theory originated from the strict operational need to synchronize physical clocks and measure light signals across distances. The error happens when we slide from a tenseless representation to a tenseless reality. Just because we can plot events on a static four-dimensional graph does not mean the physical world itself is a static, completed object. Accepting that there is no universal now across the cosmos does not force us to abandon the reality of change. We can accept relativity without accepting a frozen ontology. The block universe is an optional philosophical assumption attached to the equations. The physics alone does not require it. To see why, we have to look at what physics actually measures. Physics does not measure empty temporal space. It measures physical processes. A clock does not detect an invisible flowing substance. Whether it relies on atomic transitions or mechanical gears, a clock is simply a repeatable physical process. It produces a stable sequence we use as a baseline to compare against other moving parts of the world. When synchronizing clocks, observers are constrained by the speed of light. Exchanging pulses establishes strict boundaries on communication. Moving along diverging paths, air readings disagree, yet they extract invariant spacetime intervals that hold true regardless of motion. Minkowski spacetime organizes these mathematical invariants perfectly. It functions as an incredibly efficient ledger, tracking how physically generated records cohere across differing conditions of gravity and velocity. Relativity is a translation scheme. It dictates how to coordinate measurements between different frames of reference. It never claims to be a final inventory of pre-existing frozen events. How did we get from a translation scheme of signals to a frozen block of time? Plotting time alongside space tricks us into treating temporal location like physical location. This relies on an embedded habit, assuming time is a pre-existing stage. We imagine an empty, rigid geometric grid, then place events inside it. The logic that constructs the block universe depends entirely on this container assumption. If time is already a place-like order containing all events, a lack of absolute simultaneity looks like proof every location in the container is equally real. But physics operates by comparing actual physical processes. If temporal order is built outward from the relationships between those processes, rather than being an empty arena they sit inside, the need for a pre-existing container disappears entirely. Once you remove the invisible stage, the absence of a universal now proves synchronization is relative. It does not prove that the future already exists. To see the true cost of the block universe, we have to look at the material practice of laboratory physics itself. A true measurement occurs only when a dynamic physical interaction finally resolves, leaving behind a stabilized, durable trace in the real world. All empirical science relies on the strict asymmetry between an experiment that hasn't yet been run and one that has successfully left a public, checkable record. A four-dimensional block can represent these records as static coordinates in a manifold, but it reduces the actual transition, the act of creating the record, to an empty event. It renders the physical process of discovery completely idle. If every event is already finished, the production of new evidence doesn't actually alter the world. It merely shifts an observer's perspective within a totality that is already locked in place. Physics derives its authority entirely from the generation and comparison of physical records. A metaphysics that flattens that process into an illusion actively erodes the exact operational foundation it claims to stand on. Advocates for a frozen reality sometimes look to quantum mechanics, pointing to formalisms that appear timeless. Yet the core equations of quantum theory are structured entirely around dynamic change. A quantum state unfolds through continuous evolution, accumulating phases and transforming the probabilities of future interactions. In fields like quantum gravity, the external background time parameter, the literal variable t, does frequently drop out of the equations entirely. However, the absence of an external background clock does not equal the absence of physical change. In relational frameworks, like the Page-Wouters model, dynamics are recovered internally. One subsystem acts as a clock face, and its state correlates with the evolution of a second subsystem. Change is measured strictly through their interaction. When modern physics becomes timeless, it means we have successfully discarded the mathematical container. It does not mean we've discarded dynamic becoming. Instead of a static block, we can interpret the math through a change-first ontology. In this view, ongoing physical activity under distinct constraints is the most fundamental basis of reality. Objects are not changeless substrates frozen in a void. They are highly coherent patterns of co-change. Stability is an active achievement, maintained through structured transformation. Time remains entirely real, but it is derivative. It is the ordered bookkeeping generated by the public comparison of repeatable physical processes. This precisely aligns with relativity. Because light cones strictly limit causal interaction, there is still no single, universal now sweeping across the cosmos. We do not need to regress to presentism. We can accept that observers disagree on simultaneity, while maintaining that the creation of physical records and the ongoing process of becoming are objective features of the universe. Minkowski spacetime remains indispensable. We do not need to alter a single equation of special or general relativity to accept this view. The danger lies only in our interpretation. We confuse a highly efficient representational compression of data with a literal, completed cosmic inventory. Physical reality becomes scientifically intelligible strictly because local interactions leave durable, public traces. That material evidence is the anchor of all empirical knowledge. Modern physics demands a disciplined mathematical framework, geometric, capable of translating varying histories of change across differing conditions of motion and gravity. The operational success of relativity proves that we need a precise ledger. It does not prove that we live inside a frozen block.